Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Cross-Cultural Understanding Unit. Today we will talk about cross-cultural contact with English-speaking people. Okay, so I want you to prepare your pen and paper to jot things down. So, what will be the coverage of the lesson today? So basically, we will talk about some, cross-cultural terms, which is, I think, it's very important to be understood at the outset or from the outset of the class before we go to any further. Okay. So what are they? The first one, today we will be talking about multicultural community, and then multicultural country. In here we're going to talk about melting pot or mosaic, stereotype and generalization, individualism and privacy, and equality and egalitarianism. And they are very important for you to understand the holistic part of cross-cultural issues. Well, let's move on to the first terms. Multicultural society. What is multicultural society? So multicultural societies are characterized by people of different races, ethnicities, and nationalities living together in the same community. In multicultural communities, people retain, pass down, celebrate and share their unique cultural ways of life, languages, art, tradition, and behaviors. The characteristic of multiculturalism often spread into the community's public schools, where curricula are crafted to introduce young people to the qualities and benefits of cultural diversity. For this part, I think I will present you my own example when I was in Australia. In my university, when I did my postgraduate studies, we had Harmony Day. So in the Harmony Day, mostly every student who comes from different parts of the globe, I have some friends from New Zealand, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, India, Malaysia, Vietnam. In that day, we present the uniqueness of our country, and then we did some dancing, we sold food, and so people will see the variety of uniqueness of our country, and as well as we can see the uniqueness of other countries, which is, I think, it's very interesting. And we can see that basically some of us, even though like we live apart, but we basically have similarities. For example, let's say if I pinch you like this, then you're gonna feel it's painful. If you try it at home now, and then you might feel the same, right? So now let's move on to multicultural country, melting pot or mosaic. The melting pot theory of multiculturalism assumes that various immigrant groups will tend to melt together, abandoning their individual cultures and eventually becoming fully assimilated into the predominant society. Typically used to describe the assimilation of immigrants into the United States, the melting pot theory is often illustrated by the metaphor of a foundry's melting pot in which the elements iron and carbon are melted together to create a single stronger metal, steel. And if you can see the next one, in 1792, French-American immigrant J. Hector St. John de Crèvecoeur wrote that in America, individualism of all nations are melted into a new race of men whose labor and posterity means like the future generation, will one day cause great changes in the world. So for this part, I will present you my own example. When I was in Canada, I stayed, I think it's a long time ago, 2001 to 2002. So when I was there, I could feel the sense of melting pot and mosaic, because it's not, in Indonesia we call that mosaic, but in English we say it mosaic. So we actually stayed together with with people from different parts of Canada, and then after that we stay in one place, and then we can see like how they we'll live together. And then after having asking question session, things like that, and I found out that some of my friends are not originally born in Canada. They basically migrated from, some of them migrated from India and Vietnam and I think England. So I can feel that they actually bring their own culture, but they try to to be one. They learn how to be a real Canadian. They accept each other. So the predominant culture was Canadian culture, even though like they still have their own culture. See what does it mean by melting pot here. And then example of melting pot, here I present you. The melting pot model has been criticized for reducing diversity, causing people to lose their traditions, and for having to be enforced through governmental policy. For example, the U.S. Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 forced the assimilation of nearly 350,000 Indians into American society, without any regard to the diversity of Native American heritage and lifestyle. So you can see that people are forced to follow the rule, and it's painful, but then we have to accept it. Next, let's talk about cultural mosaic. So what is cultural mosaic? It's the mix of ethnic groups. I think you need to understand the keywords, which is mix of the ethnic groups. Languages is a mix, ethnic groups, languages, and cultures that coexist within society. So like different, and then coexist within society. Okay. And the idea of a cultural mosaic is intended to suggest a form of multiculturalism different from other systems such as melting pot, which is often used to describe the United States' supposed ideal of assimilation. Okay? So mosaic is just like, let me tell you, later I will present you an example, and so you can see why mosaic is very interesting and beautiful. Okay, so here we go. If you can see that, you can see a tile, and then it's filled with different pictures, and then different symbols, different colors, and it's made of very fine materials, and then when these materials are put together in one tile or in one place, then they present a very unique sense, which can be very, very amazing in look, right? And see the other mosaic. See this one, it looks very simple, but then you can see different symbols there, or pictures, or lines, or some very fine dots, but then it becomes very clear when they are placed together. And I think it also tells a lots of meaning. It depends on which angle are you looking at it, right? So that's the mosaic. Again, the ideas of mosaic: if you have one color, if you have one size, if you have only one picture, it won't look beautiful. Okay, so imagine if you stay alone in the whole world, like you don't have a teacher, you don't have a friend, you only have one clothes, or maybe you don't have clothes. How do you feel like will be looking like, right? Now, let's talk about stereotype, and I'll present you an example. In general, stereotypes are negative statements and interpretations made about a group of people. Stereotypes, whether deemed positive or negative, place people into boxes and categories and limit them to those specific perspectives. Okay, for example, here I'll present you, two examples, and I'll present you other examples, right? I mean, in the slide too, but then I can talk about it more. It depends on the time frame that we have today. Asians are good at math. Okay, doesn't provide the complete pictures. Someone needs to understand the Asian culture or the difference between Asian cultures. Similarly, just because you meet a 70-year-old who does not know how to use current technology, it doesn't mean that other individuals in that generation do not know how to use it. See that? I hope that you can get a clear picture, right? Let me tell you another example. If you guys meet, or maybe a community or a people or a person meets an English education student from EIN, and these students speak very fluent, and these people started to say all English education department students are very fluent in English. That would be the stereotype, because the claim only made because looking at one person. See that one? Or it's because you meet one person from Bao and then he is very, very stingy, and so you claim, or you say that people from Bao are very stingy. Or maybe you may say, Tolakines are very lazy. It's just because you see someone, or maybe two or three people, and you start to generalize people. Okay? That's stereotype. Now, we're going to go to generalization. I'll give you example too. Generalizations of cultures are broad statements based on facts, experiences, example, or logic. So when we generalize something, we actually learn, we know that from people, or we read it from news, or maybe we have lived there. There are two kinds of generalization, valid and faulty, and it is your role to determine which generalizations have validity behind them. For example, Hispanic society belongs to Spanish and English, Spanish speaking countries, this Hispanic societies, have a high degree of machismo, or in Middle Eastern cultures, women have a lesser status than men. These types of generalizations are helpful when engaging with people of those cultures. You don't really get shocked, or probably you don't really create a huge gap because you don't know anything and you just jump into the community. And so you don't know what to do, and so people feel very odd when they talk to you. So it is suggested, like if you want to go to America, it's better you read about it and then you ask how the people behave there, and so you kind of have generalization of American people. Even though at this point, the last point here, but in all cultural interaction, culturally intelligent leadership requires you to recognize that generalization do not apply to everyone within a cultural group. I think you need to remember this one. Okay? Now we're going to move on to individualistic and collectivist cultures. In individualistic cultures, people are considered good if they are strong, self-reliant, assertive, and independent, while collectivist cultures are known by being self-sacrificing, dependable, generous, and helpful to others, are of greater importance. Now let me ask you a question. Indonesian or you, where do you belong? I think we belong to the second one. collectivist cultures. Because sometimes we sacrifice ourselves for the sake of other people. Sometimes if we have more money, and then we try to give some to other people, a bit more generous. We try to help people. That's indicated, or that is categorized within the collectivist cultures. Now, we're going to talk about privacy. Privacy is the ability of an individual or group to seclude themselves or information about themselves and thereby express themselves selectively. Okay, I think you need to know this one. The domain of privacy partially overlaps with security, which can include the concept of appropriate use as well as protection of information. Okay, so the kind of overlap between privacy and security. Okay, but I think it doesn't need more explanation because it's clear there. Like, it's the ability of an individual or a group to seclude themselves or information about themselves and thereby express themselves selectively. Here, for example, like if I have something and then I want to share it to you, I need to think like whether you can keep my secrecy or you are not the type that I can believe. So then I need to select people, like which one that I need, so then I can share things. If I don't trust anybody, then I will keep it myself. Okay? Now, let's see the example of privacy. Privacy is the state of being free from public scrutiny or from having your secrets or personal information shared. For example, when you have your own room that no one enters and you can keep all of your things there away from the eyes of others. That is very clear. Now, we're going to talk about equality and its example. Equality means the state of being equal. It's one of the ideals of a democratic society, and so the fight to attain different kind of equality, like racial equality, gender equality, or equality of opportunity between rich and poor. And it's often associated with progress toward that ideal of everyone being truly equal. And here I'm going to give you two examples, political and economic. For political one, I can read you the example: access to the same process and opportunities, the right to vote or run for political office. And for the economic, everyone has the right to equal pay for equal work. No pay differential based on gender. See that one? That's the equality in example. When you understand these terms, it's very easy for you to grasp my explanation in next meeting. Okay. Now, let's talk about egalitarianism. What is egalitarianism? Is a belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political, and economic affairs. A social philosophy advocating the removal of inequalities among people. Egalitarianism is equality in authority and responsibility between genders. I I want to give you my example again. When I was in Australia, I went to a bookstore. I mean, one day I went to a bookstore, and then there I met a very important person. I think financial minister or Minister of Financial of Australia, which is in Indonesia. We need to show highest respect. And then in the bookstore, there was a little boy, very little boy. And suddenly the minister just bent down as high as this baby, I mean the boy. And the minister spoke just to make himself equal with the boy. And you can see that, like, there's no, very, very special hierarchical order between, older people and very, very young people. In here is the little boy. Yeah. And why the minister did that? Because, he believes in egalitarianism. Okay? Well, I think, as I told you earlier, that in this class we will mostly talk about the terms, and I am hoping that you have understood. If you have any question, do not worry to address your question through WhatsApp or text messages that we have agreed in the class, and so I can respond your questions. Any difficulties that you find in the terms, do not hesitate to find the information first in suggested references that I will post it in WhatsApp group. And then after that, when you find it difficult to understand, then you can just ask me. Okay, so don't worry. Well, I will see you in the next meeting. Bye.